Hi, welcome to a new video, and this is the big one, the full review of a new Gran Turismo. So after a good number of years we have Gran Turismo 7, a first for the Gran Turismo series in that it's a cross-generation release, and one that seems, from a technical standpoint, to have hit a very solid sweet spot across both the PS4 and the PS5. I did go into a reasonable amount of detail in my initial look video around the visuals and the audio side of GT7, and that still stands up a week later. Visually it's stunning, particularly on PlayStation 5, and the audio element, once a major negative for the series, is now impressive. It's not to say the two areas stand side by side in that regard, they don't. The audio is impressive, but certainly not genre leading, and at times still lacks some of the visceral nature an internal combustion engine can summon. It is, however, more than impressive enough to consign the vacuum cleaner jokes to the history books. However, as this is my full review, I best focus on the areas that are important to me, and I hope by extension you as well. Okay, so starting off we look at driving simulation, and I'm going to score this a 7 here. So we've got a lot to unpack. First, the headline. Does Gran Turismo 7 have a better physics engine and tyre model than GT Sport? And overall I would have to say yes. Not significantly, but it's still a yes. However, it is a yes with a lot of buts. So let's start with what's good. When you're moving and below the limit of the tyres, the physics and handling dynamics stack up well, delivering a convincing feeling that does a more than reasonable simulation of how a car should be behaving. And this even extends to when the car is right on the limit, allowing you, if you're a steady driver, to maintain the car at the edge of slip and maximise traction. The load transfer's also been improved to the degree that front-wheel drive cars are actually now enjoyable to drive. And that improvement in load transfer even extends to heavy braking, getting the rears out of sorts, again more clearly evident in the front wheel drive cars. We also now have a linear throttle and brake, which makes modulation a lot easier, to the degree that braking in particular is, at least with my LPCM pedals, really good. Where it all goes wrong, however, is when you step over the limit of slip. If it's by a tiny amount, it's catchable, but anything more than that and the car is gone. And I do mean into the Armco backwards before you've reacted, gone. Now, this isn't messing up and trying to catch a slide with a massive angle here. This is exceeding the slip and generating a few degrees of over-retention. Over-rotation. It's also odd that race spec machinery is actually a lot easier to deal with over the limit than road spec cars, which runs counter to reality. Race spec cars run much stiffer suspension and have less progressive tyres than their road car siblings, making them far snappier over the limit. Still catchable, but most certainly snappier. That's simply the payoff you get for a car that reacts quicker to your inputs, which of course is what you want from race spec machinery. In contrast, road cars, being more softly sprung and with more progressive rubber, are slower to react to your inputs in comparison to race spec cars, but a lot easier on the whole to feel when they're stepping over the limit, and to be easier to catch and correct, so that people don't die horrendously on the roads every single day. Right now in GT7, this is the wrong way round. And it should be ringing alarm bells for anyone with even a basic understanding of tyre and vehicle dynamics. What's frustrating is that all the work that's gone into the improvements under and at the limit is undone by this over the limit behaviour, and while it does give you a little more post-slip grace than, say, iRacing's notorious tyre curve cliff face drop-off, it's not actually that far removed from it. And it's also proving to be very diversive, in that drivers who favour a more measured and precise approach will step over the limit less, and as a result will most likely favour it, while those that like to use a little more rotation are going to struggle with it. The one thing that is true is when either party step over the limit too much and the traction control doesn't catch it, then you're going to end up facing the wrong way, and far more often facing the wrong way than reality shows us to be true. Speaking of traction control, that has at least improved from the overly intrusive model that we used to have in Gran Turismo Sport and previous Gran Turismo titles, to the degree that while it's not getting close to the best in genre implementations like you find in ACC, it is now usable, which given the over-the-limit behaviour is a bit of a relief because you're going to need it. It's also worth noting that a lot of what I've discussed is a problem mainly faced by those using wheels, as the controller implementation is heavily layered with a lot of baked-in assists. So for example, even if you turn off counter steer assist, it's never truly off for the controller, making the over-the-limit issues a lot less of a problem. One of the issues that does remain from GT Sport and older titles in the series is that while a bit milder, the issues with tyres not hooking up correctly from a standing start still remains, which may explain the reliance on rolling starts that GT7 still has. And finally, I want to talk about the force feedback. Now, initially, it does feel like this had made some very small improvements over GT Sport, but more time and exposure has led me to unfortunately concur that in at least one area it's got worse. Overall, the force feedback remains poorly detailed and fairly uncommunicative in comparison to even middle-of-the-road implementations within the genre, and it's still a long way from being the best force feedback implementation you will find on console, let alone PC. It lacks the finer, more granular detail that you need to make your life easier when it comes to dealing with the over-the-limit behaviour. The force feedback's also got a strange drag to it which slows down your ability to counter steer. Not that I believe it would help enough if it was absent, but it's still quite frustrating. My chief ire is however reserved for the understeer vibration that has actually increased in intensity from Gran Turismo Sport. Now, just to be clear, this is not tyre hop. It's a seemingly baked-in vibration designed to let you know when your cars are about to understeer. Now, while this is contrary to how tyre dynamics work, as what you should feel when this occurs is the steering go light, not vibrate. So it goes light, and then maybe after that tyre hop will occur. And what's used to be just annoying in Gran Turismo Sport is now so strong that in some circumstances it's just utterly obnoxious. It seems that in the case of physics and force feedback, what PD gives with one hand, it takes away with the other. But as it stands right now, GT really does have a split personality in this area. One that I keep bouncing between enjoying and being frustrated and annoyed by. So that's the racing simulation. Sorry, no, it's not the racing simulation, it's the physics simulation. We're moving on to the racing simulation now, and I'm scoring this a 4. So, many people were wowed by GT Sophie to the degree that they seem convinced that while PD would not be bringing it directly to Gran Turismo 7, they must have improved the AI. And that, in all honesty, is not an unreasonable assumption to make. After all, it was clear from the Sophie presentations that PD were aware the AI needed work. So it's logical then to assume that something must have been done, right? Right, no. The AI in GT7 is, from my experience so far, still the utter mess that it's been since at least Gran Turismo 5. They are still slow, despite now having 3 difficulty levels, slow to the degree that the races are still predominantly chase the rabbit affairs to artificially add an element of difficulty to them. Use a car quick enough to catch up to the head of the pack and you will breeze past half the field with almost zero effort. Well, I say zero effort, but the AI will still brake check you mid-corner and pit you if it fails to notice you're on the racing line. In an age where titles such as AMS2, Race Room and others have shown that capable AI you can race against and will race against each other in a realistic and convincing manner is possible, no excuse really remains for the AI in Gran Turismo to be in the state that it is. Okay, so less said about the AI, the better. Moving on to Motorsport Simulation, and I'm giving this a 6, which is actually an aggregate score because there are two areas that need to be considered. The first, and best, would be GT7 Sport Mode, which has all the elements you would want in terms of simulating motorsport. Balanced race categories, qualifying, tyre wear, fuel use, pit stops, tiered championships are coming, so it's basically Gran Turismo Sport carried over to Gran Turismo 7. As such, it succeeds in this area just as well as it did in Gran Turismo Sport, and if I was scoring it alone, it would easily be an 8. However, I can't ignore the single player side of things, and to be honest, this is a very, very mixed bag. Now, truth be told, the new focus in Gran Turismo 7 is on car collecting via the GT Cafe, and this does allow the argument that Motorsport Simulation doesn't enter into the conversation. An argument I could almost get behind if it weren't for the fact that the core of it, the races you take part in via GT Cafe, which is the main single player experience, and the races are as broken as anything. Qualifying doesn't exist in this world, nor do races resemble anything logical. Rolling starts with the same tired chase the rabbit dynamic are still front and centre, with a single file 15-metre odd gap between the cars and you, and you're always starting at the back. The lead car in later events can be almost halfway round the track before you cross the start line. Add in some wildly unbalanced vehicles within some of the races and the previously discussed lacking AI, and it just fails to deliver anything approaching actual racing. How what started as a mildly entertaining scenario for a mission back in GT4 has managed to become the core racing mechanic is utterly beyond me, and it's not as if it's born out of ignorance either. Kaz has taken part in enough races to know that this is just not accurate. I would be inclined to be lenient if it was enjoyable, but it's not. Early on it's just a dull chore as you breeze past everyone, and that morphs into just being annoying as the pack size increases and the lead car is so far ahead of the rest of the pack that they just become mobile roadblocks to get round as quickly as possible to then be able to catch the lead car. It's tired, it's dull, it's pointless, and most damning of all, it does nothing at all to prepare a player for how the sport mode works. By design, single player should be the training ground for online racing, and in that regard, GT7 just fails. Okay, moving on to accessibility, and it's getting an 8 here. What's been built into the core of Gran Turismo 7 is an accessible single player mode. You have to start with a very linear GT Cafe. Actually, that's not true. You have to start with the frankly baffling music rally, and I'm yet to come across many who like it or see a purpose for it, and even fewer who understand what it is or what it aims to achieve. So the oddness of music rally aside, you start with GT Cafe, which allows you to build a collection of cars and learn the wider history behind them through a series of races, challenges and other activities, completion of which gradually opens up access to the single player parts of Gran Turismo 7, from the various showrooms, tracks, tuning, upgrades and so on. It's clearly designed for those who are new to the Gran Turismo franchise, and while you are asked from the outset if you've played a Gran Turismo title before, I'm not sure that that option makes a lot of difference, as I opted for it and was still handheld as if it was my first Gran Turismo game. While potentially annoying for the seasoned GT player, it certainly eases those who are new to the franchise into things. What GT Cafe does is then open up the rest of the single player, from the return of missions covering a range of challenges, from races to overtaking, drag races and slipstream challenges. These will be very familiar to those of you who played GT4, 5 or 6. Unlocking the tracks then gives you access to custom races, arcade, time trials and so on, with Scapes, GT Auto and all the rest unlocking either via completing cafe menus or increasing your collector level. It's also worth noting that if you want to get access to sport mode, you will need to complete cafe menu number 9 in order to do that, and there's I think 39 in total, so about a quarter of the way through. It's not too onerous. What GT7 is unabashed about, however, is that the focus is on collecting cars. Unlocks are driven by it, either indirectly via the cafe menus or directly by increasing your collector level. It even has a screen to allow you to check on how many of the total number of cars you've collected, along with a friendly talking head reminding you to try and collect them all. I think I've been told that about 3 or 4 times now. It's a change from the mechanisms of past GT titles, and one that, with one significant reservation I will come to, actually works well in introducing the core gameplay loop of GT7 2-player, so it works from an accessibility point of view. Moving on now to content, and I'm going to give Gran Turismo 7 a 9 here. Now, it is true that a significant percentage of the cars have been carried over directly from Gran Turismo Sport. We do have circa 100 new cars in GT7. How much those new cars will appeal to you will very much depend on where your interests lie. As in terms of real-world cars, as the Vision cars are still with us, only a handful of these new cars are ones made past 2020. The focus on new additions is firmly on older vehicles. So if you like older vehicles, you're in the money here. If you're looking for more modern machinery, you're liable to be disappointed. The track list similarly has no new entries for the series, with only Daytona and 3 Gran Turismo fantasy tracks from past titles reappearing. The 3 are High Speed Ring, Deep Forest and Trial Mountain, and the latter 2 have been given quite significant layout changes. How you feel about those tracks heading back and the changes made to them will again depend on what you're looking for, as the changes do seem to be designed to favour higher speed race spec machines that frequently populate the sport lobbies, and I think they've been redesigned around that kind of aim, the sport lobbies side of things. Now, while the car and track counts will split opinions, what can't be denied is the extra level of polish and detail they've all received. In addition, a frankly absurd number of visual and performance modifications for cars have been introduced into Gran Turismo 7, allowing the existing cars to be transformed in a staggering number of different ways. Add in that Scapes now feature over 2,500 locations, and the sheer amount of content GT7 lays out for you to explore and collect is hard to argue against. Some of it, however, is locked behind, quite frankly, baffling game design, engine swaps being the best example. Yes, Gran Turismo now lets you swap engines, but you can't just go and buy them. You have to win them. You have to hope that one of the raffle ticket spins contains an engine, and then you have to hope that the spin lands on it. If you are then lucky enough to win it, you also have to remember that it doesn't then give you the option to pick the engine you want. Rather, you have to accept the one you're given. Not the one you want? Tough luck. Should PD also continue its trend from Gran Turismo Sport, what we're also likely to see is this content further bolstered post-launch with DLC. And if past trends continue, that could well also be free. So all of this adds up to a lot of content and an easy 9 in this regard, even with the carryover. Which moves us on to value, and I'm giving GT7 a 4.5 for value, and I think I'm potentially being generous there. Which does sound a bit odd. So 9 for content, how the hell can that relate to a value of 4.5? Well, I'm going to explain that. See, first of all, Gran Turismo 7 is a full price first-party title from Sony, which means it's going to cost you at least £60 on PS4 and £70 on PS5, a not insignificant sum. But with all that content, does that still represent great value for money? Well, yes and no. On the face of it, yes. But my issue is that for a title so firmly focused around car collecting and modifying, the in-game economy is clearly designed to make the process of doing that a significant grind. Now, GT as a series has always had an element of grind, but it's been getting worse and worse with each new release. If we look at the highest value cars in GT7 and GT4 and the associated grind to earn them, this is clearly illustrated. In GT7, the most expensive cars will set you back 20 million credits, and the highest paying races so far can net you around about 1.8 million per hour of grind, so over 10 hours to earn that car. Back in GT4, the most expensive was 4.5 million credits, and the number of events in there would allow you to net around 3 million credits per hour. So to earn the most expensive cars in GT4 would take you around 1.5 hours of grinding to obtain it. That makes the in-game economy over 8 times slower when you look at your real-world buying power of the most expensive vehicles. Add in that you can no longer sell your cars. You can only discard them for no money. That you have to be invited to purchase certain cars, invites that are time limited. And we now have not one, but 2 used car outlets, the Everyday Used Car Outlet and the Legendary Cars outlet. And the cars in them only appear for limited periods of time. And also the invites you get seem to be linked to your collector's level, so if you miss one you have to buy more cars to increase your collector level to get the chance of getting another invite, and I think you can also win invites on the raffle ticket spins as well. So what's a player to do when you get that invite to buy a car, or a used car pops up and you know that in both cases they're only going to be around for a short period of time and you don't have the credits? After all, if you waste time grinding, they may well be gone and you have no idea when they're going to come around to you again. You could try and get lucky and win it in a raffle ticket spin, and you get those for completing your daily driving marathon, but the odds of even getting a car, let alone you one, are even worse than they were in GT Sport. I'm fairly certain that Sony and PD want you to use its microtransactions and buy credits for real money. And despite past promises from PD, microtransactions have been a feature in Gran Turismo for a number of years. However, the value you get for your real world money is around 2 to 3 times lower in GT7 than it was in GT Sport, with 2 million credits costing £16 in the UK. So if you were to use microtransactions to buy one 20 million credit car, it would cost you a quite frankly absurd £160. Suggestions to buy these microtransactions are also littered around various screens in the title, including a quick link to them right in the menu bar of the main GT Life screen, none of which can be switched off. It's both disturbing and depressing. Now, my view on microtransactions are clear and unambiguous. They are almost always predatory to a greater or lesser degree, and they often lead to deliberate game design that strongly encourages their use. And in that regard, their intention is clear from GT7's design. A final word also has to be given to the always online nature of Gran Turismo 7. As with Gran Turismo Sport, almost all game modes are unavailable to you if your internet connection drops or the servers are down for maintenance. PD used the reasoning that it's an anti-cheat mechanic, but this honestly doesn't fly given the number of other titles around that are used for official real-world race series, and a number of them at professional level that don't become effectively functionless if you are not connected to the servers. It does raise a very real question about the long-term viability of Gran Turismo 7, as unless PD and Sony patch the title in its later life to remove this requirement, once the servers shut down, the game will become fundamentally unusable. It's going to be important to watch how they deal with Gran Turismo Sport at the end of its life to see what GT7 is going to potentially look like at the end of its life. So, in summary, Gran Turismo 7 is in many ways a return to form for Gran Turismo, and arguably a tour de force, even to the degree that it's got the series' trademark game design quirks like the luck-based engine swaps and the music rally oddness. It's a title in many ways I love, and it does bring back massive nostalgia hits for me. It's also once again moved the goalposts in terms of how a sim racing title can look, and it's definitely reset the benchmark as far as that's concerned. However, it is also impossible to ignore the fact that the in-game economy is designed what is being increasingly recognised within the gaming industry as an unethical and poor business practice, one that runs the risk of ruining the game's progression model for all but the most obsessive die-hard players. We also have, once again, AI that is quite frankly unacceptable in this day and age, and by Sony and PD's own admission, GT Sophie is not going to be the magic bullet to solve that, at least not for Gran Turismo 7. It's also another Gran Turismo title that gives with one hand and takes away with the other in regard to physics. And we're already starting to see people defending the areas it falls down in with an almost religious zeal. In that regard, GT7 actually looks set to become the next iRacing in regard to its physics and staunch defenders of what is, quite frankly, just not accurate. So that's my very long review of Gran Turismo 7. If you found this interesting, please do hit the like button down below, and if you want to see more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when new content gets uploaded. Thanks very much for your time. Take care.